Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the first ever vRealize This Live. We're testing out this whole live stream thing here, see if we can bring some content directly to you. So please feel free to use the chat here, ask any sort of questions as we go along. And joining me today is Thomas. Thomas, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. The freeze is done. We're all thawed out here in Texas, so I'm happy to be here.
It's incredible, and you're in a new space too, right? I mean, you were not unscathed with everything that happened down there.
No, my office is on the first floor, and it decided to rain indoors. So lucky me, I've got another room I could move into. So my bedroom is now my studio.
Lovely. Well, happy migrations. And speaking of migrations, that is today's topic for vRealize This Live. So we are looking at ways that you can leverage vRealize operations to help you plan your cloud migrations, whether we're talking about moving it to a different data center, or if we're talking about moving it to a hybrid cloud or to a public cloud. So, I guess with that, we could bring in John Diaz, who's going to be talking to us today about this. He's going to be showing us all of this within vRealize operations. John, welcome, man. How you doing?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing great. I'm getting a little loop back feedback or something here, so I may need to adjust my settings.
Okay. All right. Not a problem. We'll hang tight here for just a minute or two. Let's see. So yeah, we're getting some good comments here. So first of all, first question of the vRealize This Live is, we got to know, is John Stewart there with you?
No, but John Oliver is. So yes. So
John
later
Oliver.
on this week tonight will be brought to you by Thomas Bryant.
Yeah. That's just awesome. So, kind of starting off with the whole public or cloud migration, really, I mean, Thomas, like step one, let's talk a little bit about strategy here. You got to start with a strategy. We can't just say we're going to be public cloud first. We're going to move everything there, right? I mean, there's going to be some sort of steps that we need to take in order to get there. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't make sense just to try to carte blanche move everything, right? And you also don't want to necessarily start with the biggest and fattest VMs you may have, right? It's all about trying to understand, what are those low hanging fruit that we can move and migrate first. And a lot of that has to be planned out, right? Even when you think about most of your basic applications, if it's even a 3-tiered application, well, you can't just move one part without thinking about firewall considerations and other things. So really you have to look at what's simple and easy and start with that generally, right? Because if you go complex, then it can fail, but you want to try to figure out how do you start easy?
Well, exactly. Yeah, you want to get that low-hanging fruit. I mean, if we're talking test dev, but the other thing is too, I mean, we need to have a set criteria. What are we looking to get out of this migration? Are we looking to reduce our footprint by 25%, right? Are we looking to try to consolidate costs and reduce costs? And that's certainly where right sizing can fit into that as well, right? So, we really need to start there. Without any sort of plan like that, it's kind of hard to be successful. So first of all, we need to have that established as a baseline, right? What are we looking to get out of this project? Yeah. And then from there, we can really start to plan things out. And that's where John comes in here to show us within vRealize operations. So while John gets set up, what we're going to be showing you is what we can do for right sizing within vRealize operations, right? We're looking at those virtual machines. We're looking at how much CPU memory you're using, right? If you have snapshots, where are some of the resources that we can actually reclaim before we even look at migrating, right? Because we don't want to move those chunky fat VMs, right? We want them to be nice and skinny, especially if we're looking at hybrid cloud or public cloud, where we're really we get that monthly bill for all of our resources. So, that's
migrations. Migrations should start with good hygiene. I mean, it's something really you should think about just in general for running your private cloud today, but it's even more important to get the sizing correct and to make sure not only that you don't have VMs that are over allocated, especially as you move into the public cloud to drive up costs, but also do they have enough resources? And so we can take a look at both of those as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're just about logged in here, so we'll We'll give you just another second here.
Yep.
And then, kind of from there, once we've got the right sizing, we'll take a look at sort of the what if planning, right? So what if I'm going to move these virtual machines? Does it make sense to move it to another data center that I own? Or, can I compare that to the cost of running it in, say, a public cloud, right? We can look at AWS, Google, Azure, Oracle, Joe Bob's Cloud, right? We can pull all that stuff into vRealize operations. We can do some cost comparison there as well.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at first getting everything in the optimal size. So look at probably the easiest thing to look at first. We'll call it the low hanging fruit, I guess, is to reclaim resources that aren't being used, right? So as I said, this is just good hygiene, in private data centers as well, but particularly in the cloud. Or before you even do those what if scenarios to get an accurate understanding of what your cloud footprint may look like. So I'll just pick one of my data centers here. I see I have one that's not optimized, and really vRealize operations just tells you everything you need to know, right? I have 73 VMs with reclaimable resources. I have orphan disks, and these are disks that are not associated to a virtual machine for one reason or the other. You can see this happen a lot just natively, organically in data centers as VMs are created and deleted. Maybe they're not deleted properly or incompletely. So we can address that storage overage as well. And as you look at it, you can go through the different categories down here. You have powered off VMs, idle VMs, snapshots, and then the orphan disks. And then you can actually take action right here from this UI. You can also say, well, I only want to see VMs that are powered off for more than a month, for example, because there may be VMs that just get powered off for a maintenance reason, or you just want to be sure that it's legitimately not running. I mean, I think it's fair to say if something's powered off for a month, nobody's using it. But what's cool about this is I can actually delete the VMs from here. If there's a reason that I want to keep the VM around, I can do that. But either way, I don't want to, if I'm planning, going to go plan a migration, I don't want to plan for VMs that aren't being used. And that applies to the idle as well. So same, I can use the same criteria here, VMs that are idle for more than a month. And I can either power them off or I can go ahead and just delete them altogether. So if they're idle and you're not sure if somebody's using them, you may want to power it off. That kind of, if you don't know who the owner is for some reason, the tried and true technique for any system administrators, well, I'll just shut it down and see who screams before I delete it. But the nice thing is even when you do that, you still want to clean up those resources, so it will show up on the powered off report as well. And then snapshots, of course, and orphan disk help with disk space reclamation as well. So there's a little more to this, some other things that you can do, but for the most part, that's the reclamation piece, and then we have the right sizing component. So and I started with the reclaim because like I said, we're going from low hanging fruit to things that are a little more complex in terms of how do I take action or how do I address these. Resizing VMs is usually a pretty I want to say intensive task, not from the actual act of performing the resizing, but intensive from the standpoint of administratively. You have to check with the owner, you have to schedule the outage, reboot, that sort of thing. You have to find out what applications. You even have to justify, well, is this oversized for a reason or is it undersized for a reason? But you can use this as a great starting place. And we show you both the oversized and the undersized VMs, and we make recommendations about what to do. So here we can see a app server is not using all the allocated memory, right, that it has. And so again, as with the actions on the reclaim, I can take actions to resize the VM here. I also, and I don't think I mentioned this, I can exclude the VM and say, yeah, we know this is oversized, but it's oversized for a particular reason. Let's just go ahead and exclude it from the report. There's nothing I can do about this VM, or the owner is unwilling to negotiate sizing recommendation and so forth. You can also go directly to the VM. This is helpful if you want to show the owner of the application, hey, you know, what is it? What is my actual usage? And you'll go to the capacity screen here, and you can show them. It's like, yeah, this is your time remaining. You've got plenty of time remaining. This is your actual CPU demand. This is your memory demand, and your disk space demand. They're all pretty flat. So we don't see an increase in usage. And this is a way to kind of back up that request to resize the virtual machine. Same thing with the undersized VMs. This is probably a little easier conversation to have if the owner of the VM hasn't already come to you and said, hey, my application's performing poorly. I think I need more resources. So we can also identify those, and that's equally important, right? So we don't want to oversize, we don't want to undersize VMs. We want all of our VMs to be served well, and this right sizing helps to address that.
Well, and you don't necessarily want to move something that's undersized either, right? Hey, you moved me to the cloud, and now my performance has gone horribly.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, and that would be, you know, a mistaken belief that it was a result of moving into the cloud that caused that, when in fact. So again, hygiene, getting getting your house in order before you do any planning is vitally important in the migration process, right? Got a couple of questions coming in. Do you want to take those as they come, Matt, or?
Oh, do we lose Matt?
I think we might have. Okay, well, Martine asks,
right? So
there
you guys hear me okay?
We can
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Welcome back.
Awesome. So yeah, as far as questions go, we do have a couple of questions on applications. So, okay, we've done a lot of this hygiene. We can sort of understand, okay, these, these are oversized and undersized, but still doesn't really give us a whole lot of context of what's running on them. And so question coming in from Martine is, can we see the applications or processes? Let's see if it shows up here. Yeah, there we go. Can we see the applications and processes that are running on these virtual machines?
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? So thanks, Martine, for asking that. And I also want to mention, another product in our portfolio that can help with this, and that's vRealize Network Insight. Not showing that today, obviously, but it can also help discover applications and VM relationships. And yeah, that's a pretty important, part of that migration planning as well, because I may have documented an application topology that doesn't include some critical connectivity components, right? Like there may be some other web server or some additional service that is a consumer of that application, or that application needs to connect with to function. And if I miss that, then the application is going to break when I move it to the cloud. So in terms of vRealize operations, we can absolutely discover what applications are running on or services are running on those virtual machines, and then we can give you more insight about how those virtual machines are connected to each other. And then also from the network insight standpoint, we can look at how we may want to apply firewall rules in public cloud. If you think about public cloud, it's the burden of security for your applications rests on you. It's kind of your internet service provider. They're responsible for the connectivity to your house, the box outside your house. You're responsible for the internal wiring. It's the same thing with public cloud providers. So you can't just put your application in the cloud and assume that Amazon or Azure is going to take care of all the security for you. You absolutely have to understand what your application connectivity needs are, what your isolation needs should be, and Network Insight can help with that. So really, you want to use the two together for that application discovery piece.
Yeah. Episode on that very shortly too. We'll get Mr. Martijn Smit. You're up, man. So we're going to take a look at using vRealize Network Insight to get an understanding of that. Another comment here from Jay too is if you use application monitoring, you should be able to see that too. So right there's that whole aspect of leveraging the Telegraph agent to monitor your applications, and there is a certain degree of discovery there too, isn't there, John?
Yeah. So if you want optionally, so when I talked about the application, the service discovery piece, that just uses VM tools to find out what services are running. If you want to take it a step further and monitor services that are running on those VMs, then you can install an agent, as I've done on a couple of these virtual machines, and that will allow you to get more metrics about the behavior of the application. And even as you migrate, you may want to understand, hey, did the application behavior or performance profile change when I moved to public cloud, right? Am I using more or less network access or storage IO than I was before? Do I have any bottlenecks that appeared because of that? So yeah, absolutely. And it will, like when you install the agent, it'll monitor not only the OS on the virtual machine, but it will discover any other services that are running that it can monitor and give you rich details about that. And what's nice about this too is you get this nice relationship map here that shows you, hey, these are all the services we've discovered. This is how it's connected to this VM. Here's how this VM connects to the backend infrastructure. So this is really helpful with the planning as well.
Yeah, one point I'd make too is it's not just great for looking at the application performance after a migration, but also after right size, right? Hey, we've reclaimed these resources. Are we impacting that, right? We don't necessarily have to leverage our users to tell us that, but we can actually get some of that performance data within vRealize operations. So, I mean, this kind of, maybe kind of getting back on the track of the migration, right? We've talked about resizing, we've talked about discovering, maybe a little more context about that virtual machine that we're maybe considering moving. What about doing some of the planning? We've kind of talked about sort of the punch list, right? We can kind of figure out what VMs we want to move. That's sort of step one with that strategy. Then the right sizing and the reclamation. What about planning? What about taking a look at things from a business perspective?
Yeah, so we have a tool or a feature in vRealize Operations. It's called the What If analysis, and basically gives you a lot of options to model different scenarios for moving VMs around, adding VMs, adding or removing capacity in your private cloud or your hybrid cloud, and also migrating to public cloud. And that's what we'll focus on here, but just be aware that we have what if analysis scenarios for a multitude of things that you might do in terms of a lot of people are maybe they're not moving to public cloud, maybe they're shutting down a traditional data center, and they want to see what it looks like, what it would look like to go into to consolidate into another existing data center, or maybe they're going to hyperconverged with vSAN ready servers, etc. But let's just look at the public cloud planning. It's pretty simple. What's nice about this is the options here allow you to select multiple cloud services. You can even add your own cloud provider. You just need the rate card from that cloud provider. But the major ones are in here, obviously, and we'll continue to add more over time as customer demand dictates. And you can also plan migration to VMware Cloud on AWS. But let's look strictly at public cloud. And what you can do is select from any of the regions where you may want to migrate. So let's say I want to go US West for Amazon, and for Azure I want to compare US West, California. Okay, so kind of in the same region, you know. And what you can do is add the application profile. You can, number of CPUs, amount of memory, which OS, you know, they'll be running, how many VMs. But what is better about this in terms of the migration planning is to just use your existing VMs. Since VROps is already monitoring and it understands the profile of those VMs, how they're configured, how they're using the resources that they have, you can just select, and I'll just select some at random here, but you can filter this list and select as many as you like. So, you know, assume this is a, you know, a 3-tier application. When I click OK, it comes back and says, okay, here are the VMs that you selected. And notice we're showing the CPU demand and then the CPU allocation. Remember, if you've done your right sizing, then these numbers should jive. You shouldn't have like a low, you know, this application server having a very low CPU demand and having 4 CPUs, for example, right? So you can kind of a gut check here or an eye test to say, hey, does this look rational? Not, you know, are these configured correctly? Run the scenario, and it'll come back and say, okay, here's your cost. Now, notice we're comparing it to private cloud, right? So we're, you know, from the data center from which they're coming in your private cloud, this is what your cost is. And that's based on rate cards within vRealize operations that you can tweak, but we provide base rates out of the box for the cost of running the infrastructure. It includes things like, you know, labor and data center footprint and power and cooling and all that stuff, software maintenance, everything. You can add additional costs and prices in there. But you can see right off the bat, you know, my prices are pretty, my costs are pretty comparable in running those VMs between private cloud, Amazon, and AWS. I'm sorry, Azure. And this is on a monthly basis. So what you're seeing here is an estimate of what your monthly bill may be. And then we break that down by instances. So this is helpful too, because I've got to take, when I'm migrating virtual machines, I got to take and figure out like, okay, what instance size do I need for this particular virtual machine? And vRealize operations just figures that out for you and says, okay, this is how, you know, this is the instance type you need and the storage it's going to consume, and then a breakdown of the instance cost for each of those. And you can save the scenario if you want to come back later and, you know, run some other kind of comparisons, maybe add another cloud in here, maybe add Google or IBM cloud. You can do that as well. But yeah, that's how simple it is to do your public cloud planning. With regard to the VMC on AWS, very similar, right? So this assumes that you're not looking at public cloud, you're looking at a VMware cloud, VMware hybrid cloud, so that you're able to more easily migrate those applications, those VMs. And basically, you can just migrate them from on-prem to VMC because it's a vSphere VM, right? So there's no conversion necessary or anything like that. You don't have to re-platform. But basically, same kind of thing. You select your region that you want to go into. You import the VMs that you want to migrate. You know, kind of do the same ones just so it's equitable. And then when you run the scenario, it's going to give you results that look a little bit different, right? Because what you're getting with VMware Cloud on AWS is hosts, right? You're buying an SDDC or you're paying for an SDDC infrastructure. So you need to know what that looks like, right? How many hosts do I need? And how much of that host capacity will I be consuming? Now, obviously, I didn't add a lot of VMs in here, so my consumption is really low. This kind of scenario probably doesn't make a lot of sense. I would probably be migrating many, many more VMs, but it would give you some idea of, you know, how much of that capacity you would be using. And again, you can save the scenario and edit it and add more VMs and so forth. Down
So
here, there are different subscription rates and price breaks for those plans. So those are shown here. The default is the 3-year plan. And then if you have negotiated or you expect to negotiate a certain discount level, you can go ahead and add that in here as well to get even more accurate sizing for that. You can modify the storage, the RAID level, fault tolerance, and so forth, reserve capacity, et cetera. So you can get quite detailed on what this your VMware Cloud on AWS SDDC will look like going forward.
yeah, definitely
So
important to point out too that, again, we're looking at the configuration of VMware Cloud, right? So we're showing you need 4 hosts, but it's not 4 hosts to run these virtual machines, right? It's 4 hosts kind of, as your starting point. I think 3 is the minimum too, which we can tweak too, right, John?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I can do it with many more. So let me I should have been a little more aggressive here. Let me bring in a lot more so it looks a little more rational. Select.
Well, I mean, I think it goes to your point too while you're doing that, right? You're not going to, when you do this, that upfront planning is really important, and being able to see like, hey, it doesn't make sense, but okay, now
Right.
when we're starting to move 50, 100, we want to expand our data center. All right, this is where the cost justification comes in that we don't spend a lot of time thinking about when we're in an on-prem data center.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of times in an on-prem data center, the infrastructure that you purchase and you're purchasing it, you're not, well, you could be leasing it, but it's basically a sunk cost at that point, right? So you buy capacity and you plan maybe 3, 4, 5 years out, depending, and that's your capacity. And you don't really tend to worry about underutilizing that capacity as much as, oh, we're running out of capacity and we need to add more. So I see many customers who have excess capacity and their private data centers, which is fine. I think we've all kind of come to accept that. But you start thinking about cloud, hybrid cloud and public cloud, over allocation or excess capacity or under subscribing your capacity is not a good thing, right? From a return on value.
So we
Return
do
on
have
investment.
one question here, John, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but as far as the what if planning, will the customization of those cost drivers within vRealize operations affect those scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me get over to the where we set the rate cards, but basically the cost is based on the rates that are set in vRealize operations. And let me get to the cost drivers here, cost settings. And so this is basically, like I said, this is pre-populated for you. This is provided, so you don't have to come in and initially figure out what all these are. But as you can see on these, for example, the cloud providers, I can edit the rate cards for those. Okay, it's basically a spreadsheet. You download it, and you can change the rate card to be more in line with what your actual negotiated rates are. Otherwise, we'll just use the standard published rates for each of the hyperscalers that you see here. But yeah, if you add or you adjust for the private data center, if you adjust these costs, then that will absolutely be reflected in the what if scenarios, as well as the other places in vRealize operations where cost is visible. So
Yeah, and we can get
Jay. Yeah.
granular with this too. I mean, we can also look at it at a data center by data center level too, right? Because obviously, if you have a data center on the West Coast and you have a data center on the East Coast, you may be paying different prices for that same hardware depending upon where those locations are too. So we can get really granular with the costing here if you really want to dive right into it. But otherwise, right out of the box, we do pre-populate the costs of the hardware, licensing, just based on kind of industry standard data here. So you don't have to customize it, but if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty pennies and pesos, then you can absolutely do that too. So
yeah. One thing to consider too is licensing costs in public cloud are also a factor, right? So knowing which version or which OS you're going to be running for those, it can impact the price, right? Whether it's Windows or Linux. And we can also show those costs relative to your private cloud as well. And so you can see that we have different prices here for Windows, Linux, etc., and showing the charges for that. So by core, socket, per instance, and then you can adjust the cost here. So again, we provide kind of a out of the box baseline, but you certainly would want to come in here and revise this with your own costs. And like Matt, you pointed out, you can even get down very granularly to groups of servers that may have different price points, particularly from the hardware purchase standpoint, because you may have gotten a better discount on a group of servers in a new data center because you bought many, many more of them versus the onesie twosie servers that you had to buy because you were running out of capacity, that type of thing. So yeah, you can get very, very, very dialed in on the pricing here.
Yeah, and this doesn't just impact the what ifs too, right? I mean, we talked about the reclamation beforehand, and one of the things that we do show within vRealize operations is not just how many vCPUs you can reclaim or memory, so forth, right? We do talk the language of the business. We do talk dollars and give you a price of what those wasted resources are costing you. So when you need to make that business justification and go back to your application teams or your consumers, right, you can make that justification of why we're reclaiming these resources.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that virtual administrators and IT shops, people that work in IT shops and manage IT, one of the things they run into is this notion of, hey, we should move to public cloud, it's cheaper, right? And it could be. The answer is it depends. A good old engineering answer, right? But the problem that we've had historically is not really understanding the cost of running your SDDC, your private SDDC. Without that visibility, you have no idea, A, whether it is cheaper to run in public cloud versus your own data centers, and B, or is it cheaper because I haven't optimized my private cloud, right? I do have unused capacity that is tying up resources and causing me to buy more infrastructure than I need to have. Are there things that I could shut down, decommission servers and so forth? When I'm doing a refresh, what kind of servers do I need to purchase? And in the past, it's when I was a system administrator, it was a guessing game, right? You got out Excel and you tried to project 3-4 years out, and it's really hard to do. So having this kind of visibility is absolutely essential. Mr. Kitty there,
right?
Wants
Special
to participate.
Guest. Yeah. No, that's very cool. So, I mean, another question about kind of licensing costs. I don't know, John, if you want to try to field this one. Talking about
the application like Microsoft SQL, we're pretty much at the level of the I think you may be able to actually and our costing person Brandon is would probably answer that off the top of his head. But unfortunately, he couldn't make it today. But I'm looking to see if you can actually do that. Either there's a way to add in additional costs So you couldn't get quite as granular as maybe Braveheart 2KK is suggesting, but you could at least add some thumbnail additional cost for those SQL servers and apply it there. And so let's see, customize license.
I think one of the things you have to be careful on, like with SQL and some of the licenses, right, is it's not just physical cores. Like they'll give you a socket, but it'll be up to a certain core count, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's a socket or a CPU, but it's only 32 cores or whatever, right? And then you have to buy the additional license.
Yeah, and one thing that you can do. So I know what they're getting at with that question, but one way that we can tackle this in vRealize operations is through the use of applications. So, we talked about that application discovery and, we refer to it as application aware operations. So we discover those applications. And by that, I mean multiple VMs running services that have an interdependency that present one web store or whatever the application may be, right? So 3 VMs for an accounting app, for example, and you can group those together, and then you can say, okay, this accounting application has a cost associated with it because of the additional software like Microsoft SQL or some other licensing for whatever software that may be associated with that, additional maintenance and support and so forth. So you can do it on an application basis and define the cost for each of those applications as well.
All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody for the questions here. I guess, we can pretty much wrap this up. Thank you everybody for taking a look, and thank you for being a co-host here on the first ever vRealize This live stream. So please do let us know, if you like this or not. Feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. Just trying to get my captions up here. Hi, buddy. So you reach out to us on Twitter. Tweet at VMware Cloud Management. My Twitter is at VMspot. Thomas, where can we find you?
Kicks 1979. It seemed way cooler when I was younger.
Of course, John Diaz. John Diaz.
That's right.
So awesome. Well, thanks, John, especially to you too for taking the time out of your schedule to show us all this awesome stuff. We will be back in 2 weeks as well. So stay tuned. We'll be showing talking about the next topic here for this live stream. So thanks everybody for jumping on. Have a great day.